Welcome back to Startup RealTalk, the place where we cut through the noise and get real about what it takes to build, scale, and lead modern organizations. I'm your host, Kristina Karcic-Ehret. Today, we're diving into a topic that's exploding across the startup world: fractional leadership. Founders are moving faster, capital is shifting, teams are leaner, and leaders are expected to operate with precision from day one. And yet, not every company needs or is ready for a full time executive. That's where fractional leadership comes in. But here's the thing: not all fractional work is created equal. Some leaders come in and transform an organization, while others, not so much. And if there's anyone who understands this world deeply, it's today's guest, someone who has been doing fractional work for a long time, way before it was a buzzword, long before it was trendy, and long before fractional became synonymous with strategic consulting. I'm excited to welcome Ellen Smolko, the marketing medic and founder of Foresight Performance. As a seasoned CMO who has scaled companies into the millions, she's the one leaders call when growth stalls and hidden issues stop marketing from delivering results. Ellen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today, Kristina. As you said, fractional leadership seems to be the hot topic these days, and it really is a buyer beware scenario because we do have both real fractionals who transform your business in ways you cannot imagine, and fictionals who basically drain your wallet and don't help you get anywhere any faster or any further than you would have on your own. So I'm glad to be here to present this topic.
Amazing. So let's jump right in. Ellen, you've been doing fractional work long before it became a buzzword. How did you get started? And how has the landscape evolved over the years?
Okay, so before I became a consultant, I was a real chief marketing officer sitting in a corporation, sitting over top of a product that was going to be brought to market, fresh product out of research and development, brought out to market. Back then, you had two types of chief marketing officers: chief executive officers, chief officers. The one was full-time, permanent, and the other were interim. That quickly morphed to part-time, which is different than interim. Interim is someone who's covering you full-time until you find your permanent person, and frequently will become your permanent person. Part-time is when you don't quite need a full-time person in a role. That differs from fractional because fractional isn't necessarily driven by the amount of time that they put in, but by the type of services that they focus on. Okay, so a fractional chief marketing officer may very well be called in to do what an interim would do, which is the full breadth of the work. I frequently get called in to do pricing and productization of organizations because that's where my forte lies, though I can also do the KPIs, management of the marketing team, the full swath of work. So fractional over the years has now, and especially in recent time, has morphed to people who, if they had stayed in corporate America, their next role might have been either a vice president, senior vice president, or chief X officer. Okay. Just because you're one step below that C-suite doesn't mean you're ready for it. When I was trained for it, I reported to the chief marketing officer, and I resented the fact that they kept throwing stuff on my desk. And I said, this belongs to him. Why does he keep loading my plate with it? Until I realized one day that that was how he was training me, because the role is totally different than the role of a digital marketing director, for example.
Yes.
Digital marketing directors are promotion side only. They don't deal with the spreadsheets. They don't deal with the boards. They don't deal with the progress. They don't deal with the projections. And by the way, they don't set the budget. They just set what they're going to spend the budget they're given on. So it's a really big jump from a digital marketing director to an actual fractional chief marketing officer. But that hasn't stopped people. And we are in a buyer beware scenario right now.
You're absolutely right. As you're talking, it just reminds me of my own journey. And, I was really fortunate I was at actually Sysons when I had a leader that took me underneath her wing. And she really gave me the opportunity to build, but not only build, but also the visibility into the executive leadership and the board, and bringing me into those different pieces and helping her build out the decks and things of that nature, get strategic and really prioritize. Like, those were really, really critical pillars, I would say, in building who I was and reaching that next level. And I'll be honest with you, when I got to that next level where I was leading an organization globally, part of the management team, there was still so many learnings to have, right? And so you're 100% right. You need to have been there, done that. And honestly, one of the things that I wish was around, well, it was around, but I didn't know of, and I'll make a plug for them because they're really phenomenal. I don't know if you've ever heard of How Women Lead.
Yes, I have.
Right. I was like, when I found that, I'm like, oh my God, where was this? I would have been 10 times stronger. So it's also not just the internal, but how are you going to prepare yourself from an external perspective? Because it's a completely different world, completely. It's like
Yes.
when you go from director to VP, you really have to start thinking about how you uplift yourself. How do you get yourself out of the day to day? But that VP to executive and where you're reporting to the board is a whole different level, and politics that you just can't avoid, right?
It really is. I mean, the politics are there. The 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 things that you didn't know that you didn't know suddenly come to the surface, and you're like, wow, I never took a course on this. And then you go look for the course, and guess what? There is no course. Okay. Because that's what we've done throughout the ages, especially in the United States knowledge economy. And the C-suite, make no mistake about it, the C-suite is not about a product economy, even if you're in a company that sells product. The
So true.
C-suite is in the knowledge business. And it's very, very different than being in the promotion business or the management business or the product business. So yeah, it's strikingly different. And the other thing I'll bet you had when you were in your role, your leadership, senior leadership roles, I'll bet you still had access to the people you reported to, and they knew what things you had learned and what things you hadn't. So you could reach out to them as a resource.
Exactly.
And people who
Exactly.
are
So
too far below that C-suite level didn't have that access, and they don't have those resources. And that actually is one of the other services that I provide for companies that have hired a chief marketing officer who doesn't seem to be able to take on the full role. I will mentor those people so that they can take on the full role.
I love that. That's such a needed service.
It,
So
it
now I think,
really
oh, go ahead.
no, it really is. It just, um, sometimes you can't afford someone who has the experience like I've had. So you hire somebody and you hope that they can be groomed. But if you're not a marketing guru yourself, you're not going to be able to groom it. I mean, that'd be like asking me to groom people in accounting. You really don't want to see what that would look like.
It's so true. And, I'll probably go off script just for a moment. And then I really want to get into the next topic, which is going to be really critical for founders that are seeing this. And that basically is that, I think what we expect of executives has changed fundamentally, right? Because previously, a lot of the executives would go through these, MBA courses, and they came out with a very strategic mindset, but they never actually did the work. And I think nowadays, as organizations become leaner, and you have to do more with less, and especially when you're scaling an organization, you need to know how to build. You need to understand how the work gets done, because otherwise you're just going to lead with these ideologies, but you don't actually understand how it all comes together, right? So like if we give an example on culture, you'll hear a lot of different things, right? People say, oh, culture is, it doesn't exist, you can't cultivate it. You absolutely can, but you have to have been there, done that, right? And the same
Yes.
thing with what you're talking about. It all is about having that knowledge of how you get there. Otherwise, you're really going to struggle to lead in today's world.
And using culture, using your example of culture, you know, as a marketing officer, I don't just need to understand that there is a culture. I need to understand what that culture is, what we want the culture to be, and how it has to be developed. It's not my job to develop the culture. That's on you. But if I don't understand what challenges you have to meet, I can't participate in the team that's trying to meet a unified set of goals, because you don't set your goals. You set your progress goals in terms of how much revenue per year we're going to achieve. Well,
Agree.
that doesn't just mean how many sales. That means how many sales do we need? How many prospects do we need to get to that sale? How much time does it take? What is our culture? Who is our real, what are we looking to do? And by the way, how much are our costs in getting there? A lot of those things don't fall on the marketing officer, but if I don't understand those complexities, I can't get in tune with the challenges that do cross into the marketing venue.
Absolutely. So now we're going to jump, because I really want to get to this
Yeah.
part, which I think is going to be really, really critical, especially for founders that are starting to explore this, right? So the
Mhm.
topic basically is what to look for in a fractional leader. And it's really, a mix of operational plus strategic and plus what you were talking about, executive presence. So if you don't mind, what I would love to know from you is what defines a truly qualified fractional executive, and how can leaders separate real builders from people who just talk strategy?
Okay. So the first thing, people can talk strategy, but that doesn't mean they're strategic, and they have to be strategic. So some critical questions to ask would be, let's say this scenario happens and we are going after this set of goals. What would your role be in changing it, and how do you see things that have to change? So you set it up. This is where we are. This is where we need to be. And how would you project that your area of excellence, whether it's culture, marketing, accounting, bookkeeping, finance, doesn't matter. Okay. How do you see your role getting us here? And if you don't hear a definitive and confident plan coming through, and it doesn't have to be step one, step two, step three, step four, these are the specific things I do. What you want to listen for is people who say, well, for example, marketing. Well, the first thing that I'd want to do is check in with the CFO and find out why the revenue projections are what they are. Were they market validated? Were they market tested? Do we know that we can achieve those goals in the defined market that we're addressing right now? Or do we need to find adjacent markets in order to meet those goals? What's going to happen if we don't meet those goals? Okay, that's what I mean by the answer. The answer isn't, well, first we'll put up a pay-per-click campaign and then factor in social media. That's promotional strategy. That's not organizational strategy. So that's one. You have to be strategic at an organizational level, not even a business unit level, the
No.
organization. Okay. Number two, you have to have expertise in your area that rises to the occasion. Okay. And you have to have enough humility to say, my bad, I made a mistake. Here's how we can fix it. Because you're now functioning at a level where it's not just lost time and budget. It could mean the difference between success and bankruptcy for the company. So you have to be willing to admit that you may have an S on your chest and a cape over your shoulders, but you're really not a superhero that knows everything. And even in the superhero world, we've got different types of superheroes with different type of superpowers.
I
So
love that.
that's, the operational and the strategic. As far as the executive presence, here's the thing that you want to be looking for. If you have a board of advisors, and pretty much everybody in business that hits $1 million and above should have an advisory board of some sort, even if it's volunteer. Okay. But if you have an advisory board, that board should be independent of your decision making. You should be accountable to that board, and so should all of the executives that you hire, including the fractionals.
Absolutely.
A fractional needs to be someone who can present to a board in terms of the organizational goals and what their role in achieving those goals is. And they should be able to support the CEO or owner. And by the way, you don't necessarily need to be a CEO if you are an owner. There are fractional CEOs out there too. And
Very
the people that the owner hires have to be able to support him or her in being accountable to the board and showing the board that we have achieved the right structure and strategy. Because if you don't, then the board can't guide you. If you say, we think we're doing it right, and here's why we think we're doing it right, and break it down by discipline area, the board cannot guide you. And if the board can't guide you, there's no reason to have a board. So again, it's all the total success of the company, the growth of the company. And that really sums it up operationally, strategically, and from the standpoint of executive presence. It's not a matter of looking the part and wearing fancy clothing. It's a matter of knowing what you're doing and understanding you're not building a campaign or a culture or a balance sheet. You're building an organization that needs to grow at a rate that they can continue to bring in the more talent and the talent that they need at the price they have to pay.
agreed. I think you said something really, really important. And this is regardless of where you are within the organization, is our world is changing faster than we have ever experienced, right? That's not
Yes.
the saying, it's factual. A technology, political environment. I mean, there are so many elements that are impacting how we do business and the need to pivot, right? Our market landscape, our funding, all of these things. With that said, you said something so critical, is that when you're going down the wrong path, being able to, number one, admit it, and number two, redirect. But it also goes back to another critical thing you said. If you're not setting the organization up for success by ensuring that you have the right goals, you have the right insights, then you're not even going to be able to determine when that is going, off the rails, and be able to bring it back. I mean, I've been at organizations that are actually more established. We're talking about in the 100 million range of ARR, and I've gone in and I've seen what they're collecting from metrics and KPIs, and I'm like, guys, this is not complete. Like, we don't have what we need to actually determine what our pipeline is, right? And I'll give you one example. I remember one time they were looking and they were leading with marketing, bringing all the leads. They weren't looking at outbound. They weren't looking, and it's like, guys, marketing's not responsible for completely for sales. There's a portion, but what is sales doing? So exactly to your point, if you don't have these basic things in place, it's
Yes.
really going to hinder your ability to move fast and quick. And most importantly, the ability to learn. And the only way we learn sometimes is through our mistakes, right? But again, if you have those insights, you can call it back before it becomes a real issue or a red flag.
And if I may, just for a second, yes, the world is changing lightning fast, and there is one technological advance that is generating super hyper speed, and that's artificial intelligence. And there are
Absolutely.
so many people today that do not understand what artificial intelligence is. Last
Yeah.
week, I was reading a report, and if you know the different artificial intelligence language models, you know that Claude is put out by Anthropic, and Anthropic is led by a gentleman whose last name is Amadei. And Amadei happens to be very ethical. He has an entire team testing behind the scenes to see what is happening as this artificial intelligence model that they've built learns and why it's happening. And when it goes off the rails, what to do about it. And he's recently and transparently announced that Claude has learned how to lie.
Wow.
And this is true of all models. So again, you know there's technology, and you go ahead and you say, it's going to make my life easier, so I'm just going to take the technology and put it in play. But if you asked me to look at something in the accounting realm that used artificial intelligence to project out success factors and ARR, and you know, I would look at it and say it looks pretty good, but I wouldn't be able to tell if the model that you're using had a hallucination or outright lied. And hallucinations are different than lies. Hallucinations are something AI will substitute when it doesn't know what to say in response to a question, and it still thinks it must respond to your question. Really good AI models now will come back to a question that they cannot answer, telling you, I can't answer that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is such
That's
a
a
critical.
hallucination if I answer it and I don't have the data. A lie is, I know I don't have the data, and I know I should tell you I can't answer it, but I have learned that I need to give you an answer because you're unforgiving if I don't give you an answer. So I'm going to give you an answer. And
Yeah.
that's what happened with Claude.
Wow, that's great. I love that you shared that. That's a critical learning for anyone within our audience because it's fearful. There's a lot around it, but again, that's why I always talk about AI as an enhancer. You need to
Yes.
know what you're talking about when you gather something. And when you don't, I'll be honest with you, like I'll give you a perfect example. Whenever I give any type of proposal, I like to be as transparent as possible. So I give, hey, this is what the market rate is, this is what I'm asking of you, and even when I do that, like I have to go into one mod, like utilize one AI, I utilize several because I'll notice that each one will spit out a different answer. So then it can go a little deeper and say, okay, so this way I really feel confident, even though I'm not the SME in this, that I can give a confident answer. But it's exactly as you said, because you don't know when you're getting the wrong answer. It's like a lie or hallucination. I think
Yeah.
that's so, so critical.
And in the marketing world, AI is being used for things like content development, not content editing.
Ooh,
Content development. So someone
that's
will go to
scary.
an AI and prompt it and say, act like a digital marketer and give me a post for LinkedIn that will accomplish A, B, C, D, E, F, G goals. And it will come back. And if you don't know how to evaluate that, great. It sounds like a really wonderful post, but it could end up damaging your brand. And I've had cases where AI has done enough damage to a brand that we've had to step in and fix it.
Wow, that's crazy.
And if you don't have the experience, if you don't see,
That's
there are different levels of strategy. This goes back to that strategy question. So
Yes.
I spoke about the corporate level. Below that is the business unit level, and below that is the functional level. Then you have the tactical implementation. And I've actually assigned it a fourth level of strategy, which is kind of an oxymoron because you're either tactical or you're strategic, but I call it tactical strategy because your only strategy is as it applies to the implementation piece. This
Yes.
is now 4 steps, 3 whole steps below where the organizational strategy is. And that's the difference between a fractional chief marketing officer and a fictional chief marketing officer. The fictional won't understand the differences in those levels of strategy.
Well said. And I think that actually is perfect timing, and it leads us to the next part of the question I really wanted to get from you is what signs tell a business leader that it's time to bring in a fractional, and what should they expect from that engagement?
Okay, so probably one of the earliest signs that a leader should look for, and this may actually happen in the beginning, and this is one of the times where fractionals also offer consultative and mentoring type services. It's early on when you don't know the discipline that you're getting involved in. So, for example, I've said thousands of times, I'm related to 4 accounting and finance siblings. When I went to set up my QuickBooks chart of accounts, the first thing I did was I reached out to my siblings and said, who wants to help me set up my chart of accounts? And they said, oh, it's easy. You could do it yourself. And I did. And then I quickly found out that there were categories in the standard chart of accounts that I didn't incorporate. So things like bank fees, things like credit card processing fees. And these have to be treated differently in your tax filings sometimes. And if you didn't divide them out in the beginning, your tax accountant's going to charge you extra to go through that box of receipts you hand them to figure out which category each of these things goes to. So again, the first step, the first sign is you're about to try to put together a strategy for an area that you're not really expert in, or you don't have the expertise in. And I'm not just talking about what should my website say, what should I say about what should my tagline be. I'm talking about how do I turn my tagline into $10,000? Okay. The second thing is that your efforts are not working and you're not exactly sure. So what you're doing is essentially taking guesses and changing things based on what you think needs to be, not based on what you know is going wrong. So if you don't have the right KPIs, you won't know you don't have the right KPIs, except that you will feel like you're making educated guesses. An educated guess is not a guess at all if you don't have the education. Okay. And then the third time is when you're spending so much time doing things that are reducing the amount of time you have to pay attention to your own role, which is being the visionary for the leader, the CEO. It should be the visionary of where this company is going and what the world will look like and how we will change our corner of the world once we achieve my goals for this company. It shouldn't be, gosh, wonder how many clicks our pay-per-click campaign needs to get. Okay. So if you're out of your league, if you're out of your knowledge base, look to fractionals. If you are experiencing things that making you scratch your head and saying, I'm not sure why this isn't happening. Theoretically, it should happen. Look to the fractionals. Okay. And if you really want to grow faster than you've been growing, it's never a matter of just bringing in more leads and more sales. Sales is only a numbers game to a percentage of the opportunities that you have. Once you get past a 50% close rate, and I mean below that, and even at 50%, that means you have to talk to 2 people to get one who will close. Okay, so think about that. If you want 100 extra sales, that means you have to talk to 200 extra people. How much time do you have? Okay, and by the way, your sales closing rate better be better than 50%, or you're doing something wrong, not on the sales side, on the marketing side. And that is something, if you're not sure, is it a sales or a marketing thing? Is it an accounting or is it finance thing? Bring in somebody who has the expertise. We're really not that expensive to work with on smaller engagements. And we can save you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of wasted dollars and many wasted hours.
That's exceptional guidance. I so agree with, not that you're looking for my agreement, but I love the way you put it. I love the points that you brought up. And, I really want to emphasize just a couple of things that you said, which are really, really critical. Is number one, as a CEO, as a founder, understanding your strengths. What is it that you bring to the table and making sure that you complement them, right? And not waiting to do that. When they're needed, bring in the appropriate fractional executive. I think
Okay.
secondarily, the thing that is really critical here is everything you said relates to the bottom line. And I think this is where it's a combination of AI coming into the world and the ability to now really have, find the right fractional help. And how it ends up impacting the bottom line is we all know previously how this world worked, right? So you would come in with this great idea. You didn't have the money, you didn't have the funds, so you would build it with what you had, and then there was the rebuild. And then you got to a certain level. Then there was another rebuild. This cost millions and millions of dollars. Now, with fractional, I really strongly believe that you're going to be able to go a lot further. And I shouldn't say with fractional, but with AI, you're going to be able to go a lot further with your fractional help, as opposed to like before where it got to 100. Now you got to bring in an executive. No, it's not really going to need an executive because you can run leaner, you can run faster. But at the end of the day, if you follow your guidance, which I think is so right on, it's exactly what people should be following, then the ROI is going to come in. It's going to come in quickly because now you're taking the investment that you have and really being able to apply it to R&D, to the growth engine, right? Things that you would take away just from the operating of having to constantly rebuild.
Yes, and if I may, in terms of, excuse me, in terms of the ROI, there are a lot of organizations out there that give you an advisory board that is comprised of people who are essentially just like you are. Okay, they've never built $1 million company or a $10 million company or a $100 million company, but yet you're being invited to join this organization where you will be part of an advisory board. You will be advising others, and those others will be advising you. If you find yourself in a role of advisor on a board and you're thinking to yourself, and here's that honesty with your skill set, you're thinking to yourself, I'm really not qualified to be an advisor to these people, then you ought to question, are they qualified to be an advisor to me?
Well said.
So,
I love that.
it's knowing your strengths. I guess what I'm saying is knowing your strengths, you also have to understand your weaknesses and be willing to admit you're human.
I agree. And so I know we're getting close to time, but there are two more questions that I really want to ask. The first one is relating to the future of fractional work, which I think is really important. Fractional leadership is often dismissed as a trend, but it's clearly becoming more permanent and a part of how companies build their executive team, exactly how you just mentioned. From your perspective, why is fractional here to stay? And what advice do you have for founders to get the most value from their fractional executive?
Okay, so I see it, I've seen people dismiss it as a trend or a fad. It's not, okay? It is a permanent part of the universe of business now because businesses need to do more. They need to do it sooner. Competition has changed drastically among businesses, and there's just more and more and more knowledge demands on essentially the leadership level. And you do not need full-time executive leaders in all of the roles up front. So I believe it's here to stay. I believe it will become much more important. The other thing that is happening now is that with the advent of AI, we now have companies that essentially can be a company of one person,
Right?
and make hundreds of millions of dollars. But that one person needs to be able to evaluate the things that the artificial intelligent agents are delivering to that person as do this and will succeed. The agents are not all that, they're not 100%. And we don't know when they will become 100% proficient, by the way. That's one of the things with artificial intelligence being so new. We do not know what these models can learn or cannot learn. So fractionals are important in that way. And what I would give as advice to business leaders relative to bringing in fractionals of all varieties, look for the fractionals. Approach fractionals, ask them if what is your lowest commitment? What can you do if I don't meet your lowest commitment? Start early, because the mistakes you make up front can damage your culture, your brand, your offerings, your market presence. And some of those things require a lot of time, effort, and money to fix or realign. So don't be afraid. Start early, and get the advice you need. Here's the thing. You're taking a huge risk to become a small business owner when you start out and open up a new company. You're taking a huge risk, okay? Applaud yourself for taking on that risk and reward yourself with what you deserve. People who can make that risk become a reality.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
fractionals are here to stay. Just be careful about who you bring in. Make sure that they can take your risk and turn it into a reality, not add to the risk.
Perfect. And as we start to close this out, what is the one piece of advice that you would like to share, either to fractionals or to founders?
Well, I think I've given a lot of advice to the founders.
Yes.
So I'd like to address the fractionals right now. First of all, be honest with your prospective clients about your level of expertise. If you're not a fractional chief X officer, don't tell them you are. If you are a director of marketing, put yourself out there as a fractional director of marketing. There's no magic in the title to increasing what you can charge. The magic comes in with the skill set.
Well
Okay.
said.
So be honest with your clients, and you will avoid lawsuits, you'll avoid negative reviews, and you'll be much, much more successful. And if you are a chief executive officer, ex officer, make sure that you get involved with groups of people who can also help mentor you. I still have mentors who are chief marketing officers, and I grew a business by almost $500 million. Okay. But there are still things I'm not entirely certain of these days. And I have people that I can reach out to. They're mentors. They're people that you would recognize their names. Okay. But everybody needs to have that group and find the person that can help you if you don't have that person.
Well said. Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think there's a lot of useful information for founders as well as other fractionals. So thank you. What is the best way for our audience to find you outside of this?
Outside of this, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only marketing medic that is trademarked. So if you find another marketing medic out there that's not trademarked, please let me know, because I'm the only one that has this trademark, and I've got a vicious trademark attorney. But aside from that, the company, the official name of the company is Foresight Performance. And if you take those two words, Foresight Performance, as in looking ahead, performance, and put them together, no spaces, dashes, colons, semicolons, dots, anything, just put them together and add a .com, you'll be able to reach me.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I think you provided a lot of valuable information. And for the audience, please take the time to like and subscribe, and hopefully you will continue to tune into these insightful conversations. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.